that the fine fraction especially is high in ash content and salty potassium. This is the cause of very high pH, which is of concern for any soil. Used at the high rates we see biochar recommended at, you could very possibly harm your soil for several years. High pH, for example, reduces availability of trace elements and could reduce growth of many horticultural crops. Let's measure the pH of this biochar. I've placed it in this sample here with water. And we're going to insert the pH electrode into the material, like this. Now we're going to read it on the meter to see how high it actually is. I like the porosity and the low bulk density of biochar. In ways it's similar to peat moss. It has about twice the density of peat moss. We are currently researching ways of using biochar as an aggregate substitute in container mixes. In fact, that's where some of the concerns will be related to the high pH that we've talked about already. Anyway, we have done some plant studies in container mixes, and we've extracted the plants from them, and we are able to look at the entire root mass that came out of the pots. Let's take a look at that now. Here I have a sample of an entire set of plants and roots that we've extracted from containers, one of which we added biochar to. On the left here is the control, which is peat and soil container mix, and on the right we have added 25% biochar into the peat and the soil. What we see here, and we have seen this often before, is that the roots are significantly thinned out. In fact, the plants have avoided the biochar to some extent in the container mix, and the top of the plants is significantly less growth as compared to the control on this side.
Welcome back, our dear viewers. I was very interested in the report, and now we'd like welcome back welcome to the studio our next esteemed guest, Dr. Ahmed El-Naggar, who has a Ph.D. in Social Science Department, College of Food and Agricultural Sciences at King Saud University. And today's discussion is biochar, its potential in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So, assalamu alaikum and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me here.
Dr. Ahmed, biochar is something many individuals did never heard of, or maybe they heard, they don't understand the concept, because I'm sure this is something, a new topic for people not only around the world but also in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Can you tell us first of all, what is it?
It's actually quite new, but before that I need to say something. I came actually from soil science department, not social.
No, my apologies. Soil department.
Yeah,
Yes.
Soil science department. It's in Food and Agricultural Sciences College in King Saud University.
Indeed.
So actually, biochar is quite new topic, but it has been around for a while. Maybe it's new here. Actually, our group, we call it SBERG, Saudi Biochar Research Group, was one of the pioneer research groups to introduce biochar in the research in agronomy and environmental science. So actually, biochar is very interesting material. We know, all of us, we know charcoal. Actually, biochar is actually the same like charcoal. It is very closely made or manufactured. But actually it's called biochar only because its purpose is to add it to soil as a soil amendment. So the name actually reflects only purpose of use or purpose of manufacturing.
Right. Now, Mr. Ahmed, if we can move on towards discussing the uses of biochar, what are the other uses other than replacing it with soil, basically?
Actually, we don't use biochar to replace soil, but we use it as a soil amendment. What's interesting about biochar is that actually it has a lot of purposes. All of us, we know about the global warming and the climate change. One of the aspects of mitigating global warming is to how to sequester the excess amount of carbon dioxide that exists in the atmosphere, to sequester it in a form that we can really control. So this can be done by many ways. One of the ways is to use biochar technology. Using biochar technology means that we actually have the biomass. Biomass comes basically from plant, from tree, from whatever live thing. We take this biomass. Normally, this biomass, when it dies, it decomposes and degrades, and then carbon dioxide will be released out in the atmosphere. What we do is actually we take this biomass, we perform a process we call pyrolysis, and through this process we keep the carbon. Carbon is not emitted again into the atmosphere. Instead, it is sequestered in the charcoal form. Then we add this charcoal form, this biochar. We add it to the soil in a certain way with specific ratio. It is very useful for plant and for improving soil conditions.
Indeed. And of course, can you tell us about, like, many people are now becoming more interested in biochar. You were telling us a bit more information. Is it something that this can be also the future regarding of how the world or society will definitely function, especially regarding the soil aspect, or say agriculture?
Yes, actually, it's a very good question. I mean, biochar, we consider it as one of the methods for fighting or global warming or climate change. I don't have specific data about amount of residue in Saudi Arabia, but it's something between 6 to 10 million ton each year. So each year there is 6 to 10 million ton of agricultural wastes. This agricultural waste is actually its disposal is through different methods like burning or like dumping. With biochar, actually, we propose, or people working in this area, they propose transforming all of these amounts, which is actually considered as a burden on the environment.
Sure.
This huge amount of waste releases different types of gases. Releases CO2, releases methane, releases nitrous oxide. So when we get this amount and we recycle it through this pyrolysis process, then we really have a very good product that our research proves that it is really very good for the soil and for the plant. This process, or what we call pyrolysis, actually, it's kind of decomposition, the normal decomposition of organic matter end by release of CO2 and H2O. So through pyrolysis, actually, what happens is that organic matter is transformed into a stable form of carbon. So the obtained product, which is biochar, is very rich in carbon. This carbon is very stable. It can stay in the soil actually for decades. And actually, this is a very interesting story, because how come they discover the biochar? Actually, what happens, there is a soil scientist called Johannes Lehmann. He studied the soil in the Amazon Valley in South America. This area of soil is originally very poor, because there is a lot of rains, and these rains, it wash the soil profile, and all the nutrients is leached away, except this area. So he found that there is a significant amount of carbon is sequestered in this soil. There is significant amount of carbon and charcoal in this soil, and so on. So this area was actually very productive compared to the surrounding areas. Then scientists studied why this area is productive, and they found that this biochar, or charcoal, actually increases soil water holding capacity. It actually doesn't allow water to be evaporated very fast to the atmosphere or leached away to the underground water. This matter, which is biochar, also has considerable amount of nutrients like phosphorus, like potassium. So it actually supplies plant with nutrients.
I see.
Right. Mr. Ahmed, if we can talk a little bit now about the difference between biochar and charcoal, and what are the major differences. We do know that charcoal is something that we use on almost a weekly basis or every other day, depending on what kind of cooking we are doing, really. But what are the main differences when you come to talk about the components within the charcoals?
Okay, basically the components are more or less the same, but it is basically the method of production. We know that charcoal either exists in minings, we get it from minings, as we find it naturally, or people they do it traditionally, and they make a hole, or they dump also the wastes and they put some dust or sand, and they start burning it. So the idea is basically the same, that you burn the wastes in the absence of oxygen gas, because if we have oxygen gas, then the carbon will be transformed to the CO2. So the whole idea is about keeping this chamber for pyrolysis very low in its oxygen content. But when we do biochar to add it to the agriculture, then we have to keep in mind that this soil where we grow plants should be healthy. It should not be any harmful compounds. During pyrolysis, some changes in the chemistry of the material takes place. During pyrolysis, for example, there's pH could be increased, and we know that our soils is actually mostly high in pH. We don't need to add something else to further increase the soil pH.
Indeed.
So,
and Dr. Ahmed, our producer, has instructed that we will have in that video you provide us, which is going to be shown on the screen, which is now we're showing regarding the topic with biochar, and this is some, of course, the slides you provided. Can you tell us more about it?
yes, of course. So when we produce biochar, these are the methods for the carbon sequestration, suggested methods for carbon sequestration, and this is actually the production of biochar through pyrolysis. So basically, we collect the wastes, like we see here. It's pruning wastes from tree. We collect it and we put it in a chamber, or we put it in muffle furnace under high temperature, for example 400 degree, and then what we get out is different products. We get what we call biochar, which is our main product, but there is also some other byproducts called syngases and bio-oil, and this byproducts is very important because it can be used for producing renewable energy. So actually, this is what's interesting about biochar, that you can have a product for soil, you can sequester carbon from the atmosphere and preserve it in the soil, and then you also produce byproducts like syngas or bio-oil that you can use to produce energy. What we see here is actually the interesting soil profile of the Amazon Valley. This soil, specific soil, is called locally terra preta, and what we see here is actually this black horizon. It's actually charcoal. So this area of the where we have a lot of biochar is very productive compared to the surrounding areas, and this was really confusing for scientists, because how come this low fertile soil produce good yields?
Do you feel like in the future with this, of course, we have global warming and we have a lot of places where it's, I won't say it's reserved, but it's isolated, difficulties for them to have food and type of agriculture. Do you believe biochar is going to be the next future or the next type of technology that provides excessive food or helps us out with a food shortage around the world in the remote areas, and of course regarding global warming?
Okay, biochar actually is we cannot consider it as fertilizer or source of nutrient supply for the soil. biochar enhances the physical soil characteristics, enhances how soil hold water, enhances how nutrients are released, but it's not actually a fertilizer. So actually it enhances the soil fertility, but it's not a source of nutrients itself.
So it's just
Right.
something that assists with it, of course.
Yes, of course, of course.
Indeed.
Now, Mr. Ahmed, if you can talk a little bit about the usage of biochar in Saudi Arabia. We do know that we are in a desert land where we do not have the abundance of rain, and only seldomly do we receive rain showers. So how exactly does biochar come in handy in an area like this?
Actually, biochar is very good for areas specifically like Saudi Arabia. Like what you said, actually, we have a very low rainfall rate. We have also increased temperature, and what does this high temperature do is actually enhancing.
Burns water.
Yeah, water is evaporated at very high rate, and also the organic matter is decomposed at a very high rates. So we know that our soil is normally very poor in organic matter. Organic matter actually is its main function in the soil is to hold water. So when you look for our soil in arid and semi-arid area, when we have water, this water basically very fast leached away to the underground or evaporated. The soil, the biochar have the ability to, because why is that? Because it's a very porous material. So these pores can hold water, so increase the water holding capacity. We did some research and we published in good ranking journals. We found out that biochar can decrease the evaporation rate significantly. It can preserve the water in the soil for a long time. So yes, biochar for our condition is very good because it decreases the use, the need of a huge amount for water. We know that water consumption in agriculture is the main consumption of water.
Indeed. And in your opinion, of course, it's like how can they kind of change the shift from whatever they're using now for the agriculture industry into biochar? Where can they get a product like this?
Yes, we don't find biochar now in market. Unfortunately, it is still in the research. We did some practical work where we guided some farmers to use biochar, and we find really very good positive results. What we need actually, we need the private sector. We need young Saudi people to start this kind of small projects. We believe in the university that this can be very economically viable to start small projects to collect different types of agricultural wastes and very easily transform it into biochar. This is not costly, especially here we have low price of energy in Saudi Arabia, so this is very good chance for us to start this biochar business. I think it is very good idea for young people specifically to start their projects, collect different types of wastes that we can find, and produce very good products that increases soil production and enhances plant production.
Indeed.
Right. Mr. Ahmed, we are running out of time, and we would like for you to be giving us a closing message for our viewers to hopefully better understand the concept of biochar. It is still something quite complicated, so if you can just give us a closing message, sir.
Yes, making biochar basically is called pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is the transformation of organic wastes into charcoal, which is rich in carbon. This process takes place in the absence of oxygen gas, because if there is excessive oxygen gas, then carbon will be released as a CO2. So what we do is to try to minimize the oxygen presence in the chamber where we do the pyrolysis. Then this material we produce it under certain temperature because its production method actually controls the final output.
Indeed, definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed, for joining us today, especially regarding the importance of biochar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
For the viewers, that was Dr. Ahmed El-Naggar, who has a PhD in soil science department, College of Food and Agricultural Sciences at King Saud University, regarding biochar, its potential in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But for more reviews, go ahead and take a quick break regarding, of course, Janadria and John Raptor. Stay tuned.
So well, with that, we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are moving on to it, my absolute favorite part of the program, where we are taking you live to Janadria, and we are delighted to be hosting once again our colleague and correspondent who is joining us from Janadria, Mr. Mujahid Al-Takhis, and he's going to be telling us more about what are the latest updates within Janadria. So assalamu alaikum, Mujahid, and thank you very much for showing us the beauty of Janadria.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Good morning to you and the guests and our viewers.
Now, Mujahid, if you can tell us a little